Greetings to all the learners and namaste. This session is on information effectiveness parameters. This is the first unit of the first block of the CIT 0022 course on attributes of information technology. Here we will look at what is meant by the effectiveness of information. Information by itself has no effectiveness. If it has the characteristics that can allow its use for making good decisions, that is what makes information effective. As an example, consider the kind of information available about natural disasters such as hurricanes or cyclones 100 years ago. In those days, there was no way of really predicting when a cyclone would come or where it would strike. As a result, there was often large loss of life and property and a lot of hardship for those concerned. Today, with all the different methods available, we can track the formation of a cyclone, we can track its progress, we can predict when it would make landfall, and we can predict the severity of the cyclone. This information, when made available to the population of the area that is going to be affected, can be effectively used to evacuate people from the danger areas. This is effective information. We will also just recall that the value of information depends on how much a decision using it pays off compared to if we did not have that information. So, the value of information is something that tells us how much benefit we get from the information, whereas information effectiveness will tell us what are the characteristics of information that allow it to be used for making good decisions. So, effective information is something that is expected to have value. If the information has no value, then it is quite likely that we would not be able to use it effectively. Effectiveness depends not just on the information itself or the content itself, but also on the organization or the cultural context or the environmental context within which it is made available to decision makers. So, for example, if you have an organization such that decisions are made not based on data or on facts, but on personal whims of somebody, then the best of information provided may not be very effective, even if it meets all the characteristics of effective information. So, information is effective not only when it carries certain characteristics in it, but also when it is made available or delivered to people in a milieu or in a context where it can be used properly. Again, coming to natural disasters, if we had information about when a cyclone was going to strike a particular part of the coast, but we did nothing about it, then that information, although it had a lot of potential value, would not have been effective. First of all, information must be correct. This is perhaps self-evident. We can easily understand that if the information is not correct or not exact enough, it will not be useful. The information may be correct, but it also has to be sufficiently exact. So, for example, if you are looking at the price of a car to be able to make a purchase decision, whether I should buy this car or not, if I know the price of the car to the nearest, say, 10,000 rupees, or maybe preferably to the nearest 1,000 rupees, I have information that is exact enough or accurate enough for me to make a decision on buying a car that costs perhaps around 5 lakh rupees. I don't need to know the price of the car to the nearest paisa for deciding whether to buy it. Information that is too accurate or provided with too much accuracy may be too costly to justify the increased exactness, and it may be also quite impossible to get information to that level of accuracy. And that extra level of accuracy or exactness may not be of much value. For example, if you are measuring or want information on the population of a large city, you need that information to the nearest 100 people? Probably not. That is too much trouble and does not really provide us with enough value to give us useful decisions or to enable us to make useful decisions. Another important aspect or attribute or characteristic of effective information is that it must be delivered timely. In fact, less accurate information received in time for a decision to be made is perhaps better than very accurate information that is received too late. As an example, supposing you are driving to a particular destination, you need to know before making a turn that the road ahead is congested. If you know before you have made the turn, then you can perhaps take another better and less congested route. But if you get to know after taking the turn, it does not matter now because you are forced to travel by that same road irrespective of the amount of traffic on that road. So, knowing at that point that the road is congested does not help you at all. That information has not come to you in a timely fashion. Or for example, supposing a dear friend of yours is arriving from a different city and he requests you to meet him at the railway station, receive him there. Unless you know the date and time of his arrival, the train number and the date of arrival before they come, you will not be able to use that information. So, if a person is going to come on the 5th at 3 o'clock and you receive that information on the 5th at 4 o'clock, then it is of no use to you. That information is not effective. It would be of use if you received it, say, on the 4th at even 6 o'clock, because now you can take action to use that information. The content of the information, that is very important. It must be relevant. The content must be concise and suitable and appropriate for the purpose of that information. And the best way of doing that is to let the users of the information tell us what they want to know. If somebody else, maybe the producer or the person who is processing the data decides that, then it is quite likely that the user will get irrelevant or useless information. An example is when you are driving a car, what do you need to know? You need to know a few things like what is the speed at which I am driving, how fast am I going, how much fuel do I have left. If my car dashboard also gave me the wind pressure on the windshield, that information would not only be useless but probably distracting to a driver, because it would be information that is not relevant for the purpose of the driver. That information may be very relevant to the designer of the car who needs to make the car structurally strong, but it is of no use to a person who is driving the car. Consider a bank. A bank manager wants to perhaps know how many people visit the branch on a given day. He may want to know, do more people come on weekends, on Saturdays? But he may not have much use for information that tells him about the total deposits made by all the branches of the bank, because that is information that is of no use to the bank manager for doing his work. Similarly, if I want to go out, I may look at the weather forecast to see whether it's going to rain, and the forecast may be, of course, right or wrong, that's different, but it will tell me that today rain is expected at 4 p.m. But if it also tells me the statistics of how many days it has rained in the last 1 year, that becomes information I don't need. it clutters up the things I want to know, and I will get confused. I only want to know whether it will rain today. I don't want to know how many days it has rained in the last year. That same information may be very relevant to somebody who is deciding on opening an umbrella shop in that city. Because if it rains more, then that person would perhaps consider setting up a shop and sell umbrellas. Information also must be easy to understand. That means it must be presented in a form that the user or the recipient can appreciate and can use, can understand, can comprehend. These days, with the rising pollution levels in many cities across the world, people have started using air quality reports. And there are many sources of getting the air quality in a particular place at a particular time. I want to know whether the air in my city is good or bad, which comes from some kind of air quality index. So, I get information saying that the air quality index today is 200, and it tells me that 200 is not so good, and that is information that helps me decide whether I should go out and take some exercise or whether it's better to stay at home. On the other hand, if the air quality report gave me a lot of details about the concentrations of different pollutants, for example, sulfur dioxide or carbon monoxide or nitrous oxide, various chemicals, it's not something that I would be able to really make sense of, because I wouldn't know what to do with that information. It might be giving a much more precise picture of the air quality, but all I want to know is, shall I go out to exercise or not? I just want to know that air quality index. The information must again based on the use to which it is to be put. So, for example, if there is a petrol pump, one would want to know, the owner or the manager might want to know how much petrol is left and will I be able to get through the day, or when should I ask for a new tanker of petrol. All I want to know is how much petrol is left. I only need to know the volume. The density of the petrol and any other chemical characteristics of the petrol is not something that I would want to know every hour. I may want to know the quantity left in my pump every hour. So, the periodicity of the information and the frequency at which it is delivered depend on the use to which that information is going to be put. A cyclone warning is something I would want to know as and when a cyclone is going to strike, and that too if I live in a coastal area or if I have friends or relatives or people I know in that place. If a cyclone is forming over some different part of the world, some distant part of the world, I might be interested in it as news perhaps, but it is not information for me that I am going to take any kind of action on. So, frequency of providing the information must match the expected usage. Regional manager, a person who is looking at a particular region of a bank, say the central region, he may want to know how many deposits and how many loans have been given out in the region every month. But he doesn't need to know that every hour or every day for that matter. So, information, again, another very important characteristic of effective information is that it must be given to the correct recipients. It has to be given to the person who has some need for the information and a person who can take some decision based on it so that the information is utilized. If information is given to those who cannot use it, that information is wasted. For example, in a bank, information about loans given out may be given to the person in charge of loans, naturally, because he is the person who has to take action to give out more loans to people. The bank manager would want to know that because he is going to manage the bank or he is managing the bank. The information given to the person in charge of getting deposits would be of no use to them, because the person in charge of deposits wants to know how many people or how much money is getting deposited in my bank. He is not concerned with the other aspect of how much or how many loans are being given out. That is the lookout of the person in charge of loans. So, information that may be correct, that may be timely, that may be accurate, but given to the wrong person or to a recipient who cannot utilize it, again is not of much use. It's not effective information. Information must be presented in a form that is understandable to the person for whom it is meant. So, the amount of loans given out every month in a bank for the past year can be shown as a graph to the bank manager. Then the bank manager will be able to see at a glance the kind of trends and whether he is going in the right direction or not. The same information, if given as a table of figures, may not be so clearly understood by a bank manager, because from a row of numbers, rows and columns of numbers, it is not so easy to find out what is happening. Are the amounts going up? Are they going down? Are they fluctuating from month to month? That becomes very clear when you see it as a graph. Or if you want to compare this month's loan amount with the target that you had set for the month, if you see it as a thermometer chart or as a bar chart, it is very easy to make out whether we are doing good as compared to looking at a rows of numbers. The value of information, as we have seen in some earlier session and which we can briefly look at now, is the difference between the cost of obtaining the information and the benefit that can be derived from it. So, if the benefit from using the information is more than the cost of obtaining it, it has a positive value. And information that does not have a positive cost benefit, then it will not be effective. Effective information will always have value. Its cost will be less than its benefit. And what are the situations in which the reverse happens? Sometimes the information is too detailed to use. You get drowned in information that you are not able to figure out which part of it should I use and which part should I ignore. That is a case when you suffer from information overload, when you have too detailed information or too much information. Then it does not have much value. Or consider information that is delivered late. Information should have reached you before you could use it to decide on a course of action. But if you receive it after the time for action is passed, when it is too late to change or make a different decision, then that information is late. So, we have seen an example of that on when you want to receive your friend at the railway station. If you get to know about his date and time of arrival after he has already arrived, then you cannot actually go and receive him. Information that is sent to the wrong person or is not presented clearly, is too cluttered, again will not be effective. And information that is not sufficiently accurate also is not effective. Effective information will always have value, its cost will be less than its benefit. And in this session, we have therefore seen and understood what is meant by the effectiveness of information and what are the parameters or what are the characteristics that determine whether information is effective or not. It is effective if it is correct, it can be effective if it is timely, given in time for a decision to be made. Information content must be relevant, it must not contain superfluous information that is not relevant to the person using it. It must be easy to understand. The recipient of the information must be able to make sense of that information so that they can take some decision based on it. Otherwise, it just remains with the recipient without being utilized. Information must be delivered to the correct people or person. The recipients must be those who can utilize the information to take good decisions. The information must be clearly presented so that it is understandable, and we have seen that the value of bars, figures and charts is much greater, as compared to information presented merely in the form of tables of figures. So, effective information is that which can be utilized and using which good decisions can be made. Otherwise, very accurate, very timely, very relevant information given to a wrong person is useless. So, all the characteristics of effective information must be satisfied for that information to have value. Thank you.